So the month of July is here, and I know you guys out there want to catch your first bass or just more bass in general this month. So what are the best lures to do that in your ponds and lakes? My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it. Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all. I can't believe what I just caught. Yes! Well, what is going on, y'all, and welcome back to TRF. We're gonna be talking about July baits, and as you can tell, I'm sitting by myself right now, but there are two chairs. That means we have a special guest. One of my best friends. I filmed for him on the Bass Pro Tour. I traveled 9, maybe more weeks. We're not the best at math, but he is the best at catching fish, and it is Mr. Alton Jones Jr. Get in here.
What's up, everybody?
And I say he's the best at catching fish because, well, he might not be the best right now.
Yes, he is.
But he's sitting right now, this number on the screen, in Angler of the Year on the Bass Pro Tour. I don't know where.
Somewhere between like 1 and 5.
Somewhere between 1 and 5. So he's at least the 5th best on the tour at catching bass this year.
He is winning.
And he's gonna help me teach you guys about the best lures for July. Now, on my channel, I try to touch every aspect of fishing. The pond anglers, the kayak anglers, the bass boat anglers. Alton doesn't care about the kayak.
No, that's not true. I do care.
But he fishes on the tour, and so I wanted him to kind of touch the guys who have bass boats, john boats, who fish bigger reservoirs in July, and I want to talk about you guys who fish in ponds because my channel is for everybody. Now, there's no sponsor of this episode. The sponsor is Alton's channel. So if you like my videos, go subscribe to his channel.
How much did I have to pay for this?
But seriously, the best thing y'all can do right now and the most helpful thing for both of us is to subscribe to his channel. If you want to see a really cool storyline of how somebody fishes for a living on the Pro Tour, you're going to follow his channel, and it's pretty cool. And you're going to like him because if you like my videos, I make his videos.
Yeah, Tyler.
They're basically,
if you don't like my videos, it's not because of me.
It's
because of Tyler.
So without further ado, we're going to hop into lure number 1 for the month of July. I'm going to start with pond. He's going to start with boat. And my lure number 1, I wasn't ready, is this one right here, and that is the Topwater Frog. Now, I talked about the Topwater Frog in my June lures video, and really, it belongs in every pond angler's tackle box from the months of, well, whatever spring is to you. So Texas, that's February, March, all the way till November. A frog is applicable for you guys up north, fish ponds, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania. It applies to you guys basically from your spring and summer. But it is just the best lure for catching bass early in the morning, late in the evening, on top of structure, on top of grass, and it's the only true weedless topwater, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the only true weedless one. And as the water gets warmer in y'all's ponds, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, you start getting the snot grass. Nasty stuff that your lures get caught in, and that's kind of gonna be the theme of my pond lures, is ones that you can keep away from the grass. And the Topwater Frog is really the only one to do that. But if you do have some open water, I'm gonna crisscross with Alton's first lure he's gonna talk about, and that is the Topwater walking bait. It imitates a bait fish really well, and I think with the 3 treble hooks on there, has a good chance of hooking fish and getting that fish to the bank. And so if you're not throwing either a frog or a Topwater walking bait, you are missing out. So I'm gonna hand this back to you, and you're gonna talk about why in big lakes in the month of July, that lure is so good.
So for my first big surprise lure that Tyler already unsurprised for me, it's gonna be a Topwater walking bait. There's hundreds of variations of this bait, and hundreds of different sizes of this bait, all the way up to ones this long and all the way down to ones that long. And the reason I chose a Topwater walking bait is it's a really versatile bait, north to south, east to west. When you get to the month of July, most of the fish, they're out of their spawning moods. They're either feeding up or they're in their summertime patterns. And if you've got bait fish such as shad or alewives, a topwater is a great way to imitate those. Now, one thing I'm going to look for in July is a slick, calm day. I prefer not to throw a walking bait when it's windy. First off, because you can't walk the dog effectively with it. And two, when it's calm, I like to throw this bait sometimes out in deep water if it's really clear. And you know,
especially northern fish, they'll come up.
Yeah, they'll come up far for it.
Yeah.
And you know, on a slick, calm day, this bait just has a lot more presence when there's no ripples on the water, and all of a sudden you've got this thing making noise, creating lines and ripple trails. Gives those fish something to track, so it allows the fish to find the bait better. Yeah. It's just a great way to cover water. If you're shallow, running the bank for herring fish, walking bait. If you're around brim eaters down in south, big fish that just live shallow all summer, walking bait. Yeah. So it's a versatile bait, north to south, east to west. The bass love it, and it's honestly probably one of my favorite ways to catch a really, really big bass in the summertime.
And now we're moving on to lure number 2. And for ponds, you know, I could really pick a whole bunch because there are so many lures that work well for pond fishing, but I'm gonna pick one that I think can get you the biggest bite in your pond, and that is the big soft plastic worm, the mega worm. And the reason why I pick this worm is because, one, he talked about the presence of this thing. It is big down there. Oftentimes they have the Strike King anaconda worm here has a big, floppy tail going through the water, and so it pushes vibration at least a lot for a worm as is concerned. But the biggest thing is that it is heavier, which allows you to make farther casts. If you're trying to whip out from the bank past the lily pads and the snodgrass and a lot of ponds have a really shallow, grade until they get to that little, maybe it's only 6 feet deep or 10 feet deep in the middle, but you want to get to the farthest middle portion because July is one of the hottest months of the year. And besides the morning bite, which is where the topwater excels in ponds, you're not going to catch many fish up shallow. So you want a lure that can actually physically get farther, and a weightless, soft plastic jerkbait, a wacky worm, it's just not really feasible to get that thing far out there. And especially with like a 3/16 or an 1/8 ounce weight on this worm, you can really bomb it out there. And once you get deep enough, that snodgrass can no longer grow, which is why the big worm is such a fantastic lure, and it's effective in ponds this time of year. I usually throw it on a 5 or 4, 5, or 6, depending on the worm, aught hook, with, like I said, 1/8 ounce, maybe 3/16 at a maximum in terms of weight, because this worm is kind of heavy in itself. No mayflies, but I just choked on my spit.
I'm gonna add in something. A bait like that too, you're using a heavy weight, you really get a feel for the fishery. Like you're crawling along the bottom, you can tell where every stick is. And I think fishing slow, especially when pond fishing, people ask how to like break down a fishery.
Yeah.
I think something slow with a good, tungsten or lead weight on the front of it, crawled slow, allows you to learn the lay of the lake.
That's true.
Because you're feeling, oh yeah, this is some crispy grass. Maybe it's hydrilla. Oh, that's a brush pile. Oh, there's rock out there. There's shell.
Exactly.
And so, learning a fishery is really key for repeated success.
That's true.
That's a great bait to do it with.
Yeah, going back to the pond, I know you guys, I teach efficiency here on this channel, and so I want you guys to be able to stop wasting time, especially going back to fisheries you've been to before, ponds you've been to before. And so if I stand here and cast 40 yards that way, my lure is going to go through a brush pile or going to go over a rock pile. With a wacky rig, you can't really feel that. With a weightless soft plastic, you definitely can't feel that, because anytime you move it, it hops it off the bottom. So that's why a football jig is in the same vein. Really, jigs in general are in the same vein, but jigs tend to really dig into the bottom, and even in deeper water, you may still have some snot, some moss down there, and so I think that's where a soft plastic worm.
Jig's gonna get hung up. That's not.
That's true. A jig, a jig would get hung up in the brush out there, where this would not. So that's why I say a worm is so good, especially in the hottest months. Those big fish are not usually crazy aggressive. You're not gonna catch your 7-8 pounders on the bank chasing a square bill. That's just, I'm not saying you can't. There's always anomalies out there, but for the most part, in the June, July, August, I try to go with the bigger or the smaller, the drop shots or the big worms. So that is my lure number 2 for ponds. What about lakes, Mr. Jones Jr.?
So I've got 2 here, and I'm trying to decide which ones I want to do first, but I think I'm going to go with Old Faithful. And this rig right here is, in the past 10 years, has probably weighed more bass worth money in professional fishing than any other lure.
I bet.
All times a year, but especially in the summertime, and this is a drop shot. There's several things to think about when throwing a drop shot. You've got your line size, because it is a finesse tactic. I typically keep it around 8 pounds, but one thing that people don't think about a lot is your leader length. I think it's the most important factor of a drop shot, depending on the type of cover you're fishing, the clarity of the water you're fishing, what they're feeding on. And, a lot of it is trial and error, trying to figure it out. We're up north now. Lake St. Clair's got really short grass. I feel like they're feeding on the bottom. They're not feeding up. Yeah. So the goal is, this is a fairly short drop shot leader, about 8 inches long. The goal is to get the weight to go into that shallow, snotty grass, but I want the bait to be as close to the top of that grass as I can.
Exactly.
Right? So that they're coming down to feed basically off the bottom, but I don't want the bait to foul up. And the cool thing about a drop shot too, there's a bunch of different baits you can throw on it. Like you can see here, I've got a real weird Japanese creature bait.
He's sponsored by a Japanese lure company, so he's always throwing the craziest stuff.
Yeah, so it's a crazy, unique bait, but you've got your typical hand-poured colored worms, you've got shad-shaped worms. The number of things you can throw on a drop shot are endless. It catches them, whether you're fishing a tough Tennessee River school. I throw it back home fishing deep brush. I'll flip stumps with it when fish are finicky. And then when you come up north, smallmouth love a drop shot. That's no
Yeah,
surprise there.
yeah.
So the versatility of this bait, and then also, especially in the South, when we're talking about July, fishing's usually kind of peaked in the summertime and started to get tough again. Drop shot's a good way to generate bites, and that's why it's on my list.
Yeah, I don't care if you're in South Florida. Maybe not Okeechobee. Maybe Okeechobee's a little bit.
I guarantee you, I'd go get a bite on a drop shot at Okeechobee.
Okay. So South
I
Florida.
might break it off. I might break it off in the grass,
That's
but I'll
true.
get a bite.
But that right there was lure number 2. Now we're going to talk about lure number 3, and stay tuned because we have one secret tip that I'm going to collaborate with Alton on that I haven't told him we're going to talk about yet, that I just thought about in the last minute. So stay tuned. Lure number 3. And again, you could select so many lures for ponds this time of year. Again, chatterbaits, vibrating jig, wacky rig, they could all apply to these lists at all times. Matter of fact, they should be honorable mentions. Not even honorable. They should be on the list.
It's really hard to narrow it to just 3 baits.
It is.
Bass eat a lot of different types of forage,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of different types of waters. So I can't limit it to 3 baits because there's about 3,000 baits in my boat at any time.
Yeah, same with my tackle box in my truck. So, but I want to select a moving bait because I know I had topwater. It's kind of a moving bait, but you can slow it down to where it doesn't move at all. And the soft plastic worm is hopped on the bottom. But I want to talk about the soft plastic weedless paddle tail swim bait. The reason why I'm talking about this is because it can work in the same exact locations as the vibrating jig and the spinner bait, but especially if you have those conditions like he talked about where it's dead calm and you have those snot grass situations. Let's say the fish are not, feeding on top water around the snot grass, even healthy hydrilla, milfoil, whatever grass you have in your pond. A vibrating jig and a spinner bait, the 2 most common moving baits, lipless crankbait especially, they are not weedless. And so with the spinnerbait being a little more weedless, but still not weedless, this thing is almost 100% weedless. It is a lot more finessey. So when people in your local pressured pond have been throwing vibrating jigs day after day after day, can it still work? Yes. But oftentimes throwing something different the fish don't see can get you a bite. And this here is the Strike King Rage Swimmer in a 4.8 or 4.75 inch size. I throw it on a belly weighted hook. You can throw it on a pegged weight on the nose, but I found that the belly weight just has a better action in the water, allows that bait to sit more horizontal as it swims. And my favorite color is baby bass because if they're feeding on bait fish, it has a little bit of that in it. And if they're feeding on bluegills or gobies, you have green pumpkin on the top. And I think this swim bait right here is a great way to cover water, especially during calm conditions, and catch some bass. And it just got crazy windy.
Yeah, I'm so glad I'm not out on the lake right behind us.
So that right there was my 3rd pond lure. Again, so many pond lures can apply in the month of July, but those are the 3 that I think you should try if you're not already. All my tackle, as always, rod, reels, hooks, baits, is linked in the video description, and I'll also put Alton and some of his sponsor stuff down there in the video description as well. Now, it's time for you to talk about lure number 3 for the big old lakes.
So lure number 3 is going to be one, it's been around for a long time, and that's going to be a deep diving crankbait. So, if you're in the South, the fish have been out offshore now for at least a month, and a deep diving crankbait, when they're in big schools, what they're waiting on is either threadfin or gizzard shad to come swim over that hump, over that brush pile, and things like that. Now, a crankbait is big when it comes to timing, okay? You could fish this school 3 times with a crankbait during that day and not get a bite. But that one time when you hit them and hit them right, you're going to load the boat, catch a big limit of fish, catch the biggest fish in the school, and you're going to catch multiple on back-to-back-to-back casts. We saw it on Lake Guntersville just a few weeks ago. And if you're up north, we're on St. Clair. The paint's been chewed off this one this week. I'm catching big smallmouth on it. The Great Lakes is a great place to throw a big crankbait, whether you're on Oneida, Cayuga, and even out, Mille Lacs, and then you head to the West Coast. A big crankbait as the fish move offshore.
Clear Lake in California is a big crankbait lake.
Yeah, and a big crankbait can mean a lot of different things, but I'm talking crankbaits that dive deeper than 12 feet. This one dives 12 to 14. They make them to where they dive up to 30 feet. So depending on the fishery, the water clarity, but a big crankbait it's something you can cover a lot of water with, for one. If you're in an area where, say, scanning isn't appropriate, maybe there's some grass and stuff and the fish, you can't side scan effectively, a crankbait's a great way to find those schools. And once you do locate the schools, almost always my first cast is going to be with a crankbait, because if you're going to fire them
and then
up,
a drop shot.
well, but that's not my first cast.
Oh, that's
first
true.
cast is going to be with a crankbait,
right.
because if you're going to get rich quick,
that's true.
It's going to happen on something like a crankbait or a flutter spoon or something like that. Something that's really going to get those fish fired up.
And then once they die.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they don't die.
That's true.
A drop shot's a cleanup bait.
Yeah.
But always, you want to give yourself that opportunity to fire that school up. Deep diving crankbait's a great one, whether you're fishing big schools or you're fishing isolated brush, stumps, rocks. Big crankbait, big bites. Make sure you guys are throwing that on the lakes you're fishing back home during the summer. And I like to almost always reel it very fast. Now I stop and go it. Trying, if one's trailing it, I do want to give it a hard stop so that they run into it. But usually in the summertime, faster is better.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, that was our top 3 lures. But like I said, we have one more tip that I want to talk to you guys about that he doesn't quite know about yet.
I'm interested.
And it's something I talk about several times a year, and it's kind of front in my mind right now because I was answering DMs till late in the night, the other day, and I got at least 3 or 4 of the exact same comment, the exact same situation a lot of you anglers are facing out there, and it's, I can't catch fish right now, and the lure suggestions you're telling me, they're not working. And my first question always is, how early are you getting to your body of water? And they're like, I don't know, I'm going after work. And I say, well, if you ever go in the morning? Yeah, on the weekends. What time are you getting there? 7:30? Like, kid you not. Somebody told me they're only fishing from 7 to 9. The sun nowadays rises at like 5:30. And so I'm gonna speak from a pond perspective, and I'm gonna have him speak from a lake perspective as to why getting there early is so important. Not saying you can't catch fish in the afternoons, but at least in ponds naturally are smaller bodies of water. And so they are going to be hotter for the majority of the water body than most big lakes out there, and the fish don't really have a chance to escape into 40, 50, 60 plus feet of water to find colder water temperatures. And so that morning bite is so crucial because the fish need to feed, and they happen to move shallower because the water at nighttime, as long as you don't have like 97-degree nights, the water is going to be a little bit colder at daybreak than it will be even an hour after the sun rises. And so if you're in a pond and you're struggling to catch fish, get out there before the sun rises. I know it's hard. It's not always easy to get out of bed, but if you can get out there before the sun rises, I can tell you guys, you're gonna have a lot more success on the water. Now, when it comes to lakes, there's a few more things that I think he's gonna talk about of why getting out there early is important in the summer.
You beat the jet skiers.
You beat the jet skiers.
Okay. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yes.
But, Tyler talked about, your early morning bite windows. Unless you have a day like what we've got behind us where it's misty and foggy and nasty.
Canadian smoke behind us.
Canadian smoke. Low light conditions are really, really important when it comes to a moving bait, aggressive bite.
Yeah.
And the reason being, like, a bass is a predator, and it's not to say they can't chase down a minnow at any time and catch that minnow, but they don't want to use more energy than they have to, right? So, like, this is going to be a weird link up, but like if you watch National Geographic, a lion will lay there all the time and there will be buffalo walking past it and it doesn't do anything because it's looking for that one easy meal.
Yeah.
And so when you get these low light conditions, a cooler morning, these shad are gonna raise up in the water column, the bass are gonna sit under them. The shad will have no idea what's coming. Like, it's an easy meal. The bass don't have to use a ton of energy to do it. So they're an opportunistic feeder. They're gonna use those feeding windows to get those easy meals when they can. And so, they don't want to use any more energy than they can to get protein. It's just how they're made biologically to survive. And when their metabolism is sped up, and they're in the summertime, their metabolism is sped up. So they have to be careful with how much energy they use. When they use that energy, they better be feeding. And when those shad can see them when the sun's out and it's bright, it's a lot harder for them to get that snack. So
exactly. And that's from a biological standpoint. I actually want to go back for a second. You talked about jokingly you beat the jet skis. One of the things that pleasure boaters do, we love them, and I've been one many times in my life, but naturally they have bigger wakes. And so they will, throughout the day, especially come evening time, the banks will be totally trashed. So the muddy, silty, grassy, and so I'm not saying you can't catch them shallow in the afternoon, but oftentimes it's just not a hospitable environment for a bass to live in come 9 a.m. to beyond, because unless you're like way deep in a pocket or in a no wake zone, but if you're fishing on the main lake somewhere on a big point, your chances of catching them on a crankbait, on a topwater, are way better up shallow in the morning as opposed to later on, because you've beat the jet skiers and the wakeboarders and the wake surfers
and the yachts and everything else.
That's my big tip. That's our 3 lures. Again, go subscribe to Alton's channel. We're trying to make some cool content over there. He does, of course, all tournament content right now on the Bass Pro Tour. Hopefully he wins Angler of the Year. We'll see about that. If y'all want to watch and learn from my newest masterclass teaching video on the drop shot, I will leave that video in between our heads right here. And on top of Alton's head, or his, actually down here, I'll put one of his videos you can watch where he smokes 28 pounds, 27 pounds on a drop shot.
Yeah, or Adam, you could put that one, or you could put the deep crankbait one. Either one.
He
A 20-pound bag on a
deep crankbait here, drop shot here, drop shot here.
Sure, wherever you want it.
Click around, and we'll see y'all next time right here on TRF.